You've been busy with this for long, the climate change. Do you think we're going to win?
I'm much more optimistic now than I was, say, 5 years ago. I mean, there was a period after Copenhagen when I actually needed to take a break from this whole process because I felt it's not going anywhere. But what we've seen in the last 5 years is an enormous breakthrough of renewable energy. The prices of solar panels have come down 80% in just 5 years. They're not just luxury for industrialized countries anymore. They are really, increasingly the cheapest way to produce new electricity, which also means that it can also solve not only the climate problem, but also the energy access problem. So once you start finding these kind of co-benefits, when you don't have to make the choice between environment and development, for example, then you start to win. So the breakthrough of renewables is certainly one thing. The other thing is that the multiple problems of fossil fuel use have become more apparent in just 5 years. I mean, just taking the air pollution problem, which has become apocalyptic in China, means that they are now taking drastic measures to reduce their coal use, not primarily because of climate change, but primarily because of their national interest. People can't breathe anymore. People can't, live happy lives and raise their children in cities. So that's another reason for optimism. I mean, the problems have become so bad, and climate change is not the only driver, that people actually increasingly want clean energy and believe that that's what we deserve. And perhaps, thirdly, that, since emissions in countries like China, for example, have grown so fast, it means that they've also recognized their responsibility in a different way. I mean, their emissions per capita are already higher than those of Europe, and of course South Africa's emissions per capita are also pretty high because of the coal emissions. And it does, you can already see changes in these countries' positions. They do recognize that they increasingly, need to take responsibility because it's in their own interest, it serves their own, people, national security and so on, to prevent climate disasters and to move to clean energy. So for these three reasons, I am more optimistic than ever before.
Do you think that it seems to me, if you have a look at all the various meetings I've been through, that the governments don't seem to be working for the people at all, or for the good. They seem to be in the control of those people who are trying to make money. And I've just come from the one about the pulling down of the forests in Bolivia, and they're ignoring their own constitutions most of the time. Do you not believe that those people will still manage somehow to prevail? Because, I mean, this is a serious blow for fossil fuel people who are controlling the world right now, if we stop using carbon.
Right, and that's the situation where we've been locked in for a long time. Governments have been more busy protecting the interest of their fossil fuel industries rather than protecting the interest of their own citizens. But that too is now changing because of the solar revolution, because renewable energy, in particular solar and wind, are becoming so cheap and are so fast, relatively fast to build and run, that people can have their own power production. They can have their energy independence. They don't have to wait for the government to solve things. They can form communities and start solving their energy problems and climate crises on their own. Which, of course, in forerunner countries where these kind of models are really big already, like in Denmark and Germany, yes, they started initially. They started from people wanting change, people demanding clean energy, and then governments feeling they need to give the means for them to do that, like policies that will enable that. And when people got going, we've ended up in a situation where, for example, in Denmark, 75% of the wind turbines are owned by citizens, by households, and so on. Wow. While in Germany also, it's like about half of the power, the renewable power, is owned by people themselves. Mm-hmm. And it means that what just is happening in Germany, that they started to challenge the old utilities much faster than they thought. So E.ON, for example, had to now, after maybe a couple of really bad years, because renewables are eating the profits of their fossil fuel-based production, that they had to admit that, now we're changing our strategy. We are also moving to renewables and efficiency and grids. So this is really people power forcing change. And I do think that thanks to the declining prices in renewables, we're going to see much more of this around the world.
Nuclear is the other big bad one. Nuclear, in my opinion, is a disaster because it's not even a net producer of energy. But do you have, is there any movement against, you come from which country?
I come from Finland.
Finland, oh wow. Do you use nuclear there?
Yeah, it's a very topical discussion in Finland. We have, our parliament is going to decide on a new nuclear plan basically this week, which is completely ridiculous because we currently already have one really badly failed nuclear project, which has doubled or tripled its original price estimation. It's taken at least 3 times the amount of time it was to take to build it, and it has been a complete economic disaster. And yet there is a group of investors who want to build another one together with our neighbor Russia and their state company Rosatom, at a time when no European country should basically be doing energy deals with Russia because of the Ukraine situation. So it's a completely bizarre situation in my country where the rest of the world is pretty much moving to the other direction. I mean, if you look at the IPCC science, for example, they say that, well, nuclear is mature technology, it could play a role, but in practice it's in decline. People don't want it, it faces many barriers and risks, so they don't really put a lot of hope into it. And you can also see that in the scenarios of the International Energy Agency, their predictions for nuclear are declining each time. And now, for example, this year they said that, well, again, nuclear could play a role. But there are challenges like countries, well, the bad economics are already, stopping it from being built because renewables, for example, are simply so much more attractive. And secondly, there are costs that governments probably and companies haven't included yet fully in their cost estimations, which is things like the true cost of decommissioning the plants once their lifetimes are over. We don't really yet have so much experience of that, so the true costs are still a bit of question mark. So this is going to add another economic barrier to the development of nuclear. So I think that nuclear is on its way out anyway. I mean, even in a country like China, which has started and wanted to have an ambitious nuclear program, they are already producing much more electricity with wind than nuclear. So that tells you about the race we are having and who's winning it.
In China, they were building so many coal-fired power stations every week. Is that still happening?
That's where quite a big change is already happening which started just like a year ago. Because in 2010 they were still adding in 1 year, as much new coal-fired power plants than the whole of Germany has. So they were increasing the whole of the first decade of the century in a massive speed. But now it meant that their air pollution problem accumulated in a very short period of time, and they've also started to see that, well, the whole coal mining and coal burning industry has a very big water footprint. So in areas where you're already suffering from water shortage, opening new coal mines or building new coal plants is not a smart thing to do. So these problems have started to accumulate in such a short time that they've had to introduce quite strong restrictions to the new build of coal in key economic regions, as well as, for the first time setting caps for coal consumption, and even, requirements for declining use of coal in key regions. So we're not yet seeing the full implications of this in, for example, emission scenarios, but what we are seeing is that it looks like while the coal consumption has been growing like 5 to 10% a year in the first decade of the century, now for the first time this year it looks like they're declining perhaps by 1 to 2%, and that is a dramatic change. It might not be permanent yet, but it is a sign of an approaching peak in China's coal use.